It started with a paper cup sitting on the edge of my desk. Not mine. Never was. Half empty. The ice already melting. Condensation slowly soaking into the papers I had worked on all morning. I remember staring at it for a second longer than normal. My brain trying to make sense of why someone else's drink was sitting inches away from my keyboard, like it belonged there. And then I felt it, that quiet, sinking realization that this wasn't an accident. This was routine, this was normal. To them. Before I could even process it, footsteps echoed back toward me. The same coworker who had dropped the drink casually picked it up on the way back from the restroom without even looking at me. No apology, no acknowledgement, not even eye contact, just a smooth grab and walk away. Like my desk was a pit stop, not a person's workspace. And that's when it hit me harder than the disrespect itself. They didn't see me, not really. I wasn't a coworker in their mind, I was just there. If you've ever worked in an office, you already know how this kind of thing starts. Small, quiet, easy to ignore at first. I had a corner desk near the door, the kind of spot that looks good on paper, but slowly becomes a nightmare in real life. Being near the door meant foot traffic, constant movement, people cutting through my area because it shaved 5 seconds off their walk. 5 seconds stolen from me. Dozens of times a day, every day. At first it was only drinks. Coffee cups, soda bottles, energy drinks buzzing with caffeine and entitlement. They'd slow down, extend an arm, and set their drink on my desk while heading to the restroom. Always with the same confidence. The kind that says, "This is fine. This belongs here." Then they'd come back and pick it up like nothing ever happened. Like my desk wasn't covered in paperwork. Like spills weren't a risk. Like my job didn't require focus. I tried being polite. I tried being reasonable. I smiled. I asked nicely, "Hey, could you not leave drinks on my desk? I really need the space to work." They nodded. Every single one of them nodded. Some even apologized. And for a brief moment, I thought that was the end of it. I thought basic human decency had kicked in. I was wrong. They kept doing it. Not once or twice, multiple times a day. Same people, same behavior, same total lack of respect, and slowly, the drinks became the least of it. They started cutting closer behind my chair, close enough that I could feel the air shift as they passed, close enough that their bags brushed my shoulder, close enough that if I leaned back even slightly, I'd bump straight into them. Sometimes they didn't even bother avoiding me. They'd clip the back of my chair, hard enough to jolt me forward. My spine would tense, my hands would freeze on the keyboard, and I'd hear an annoyed sigh behind me like I was the inconvenience. Not them walking through my workspace like it was a hallway. There were days I couldn't roll my chair back, more than 6 inches without nearly hitting someone. 6 inches. That's how much room I was allowed in my own work area. And the worst part? It was always the same handful of people. They knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't ignorance. This was habit mixed with entitlement. I'd sit there pretending to focus on my screen while my jaw clenched, so tight it ached. My shoulders stayed tense all day. Every footstep behind me felt like a warning. I started timing my movements, waiting for gaps in traffic just to open a drawer or shift my chair. And slowly, something inside me started to crack. Not explosive anger, something colder, something heavier. That feeling you get when you realize no one is coming to help you, that your comfort doesn't matter, that your boundaries are optional. I remember thinking, why is it always like this? Why is it always the people who try to be polite that get walked over? I didn't want to complain to management. I didn't want to start drama. I didn't want to be labeled difficult. But I also didn't sign up to be a free table in an obstacle course. Day after day, I watched them treat my desk like public property. And every time I swallowed my frustration, they pushed a little further. That's how it always works. People test boundaries quietly, and when nothing happens, they assume there are none. And one afternoon, as another drink appeared on my desk without permission, something finally clicked. If they saw my desk as trash space, then I would treat what they left there exactly the same way they did, like it didn't matter. So I made one small change. Subtle, innocent, impossible to argue with. I added something to my desk that no one questioned. No one noticed. No one thought twice about a wastebasket. And from that moment on, the drinks started disappearing. The wastebasket sat there like it had always belonged. Plain, gray, innocent. Tucked neatly at the far end of my desk. Just close enough to be useful. Just far enough to feel intentional. No sign, no announcement. No passive-aggressive note taped to it. I didn't want attention. I wanted results. The first test came quicker than I expected. I heard the footsteps before I saw the arm extend. Same coworker as always. Same lazy confidence.
Same paper cup.
He didn't even slow down this time. Just reached out and placed his drink on my desk without looking. Already halfway turned toward the restroom. I felt my shoulders tense. My fingers pause over the keyboard. My heartbeat quicken. This was it. My first real choice. I waited, not dramatically, not obviously. I finished the sentence I was typing, counted a few seconds in my head, then reached out calmly, picked up the cup, and dropped it straight into the wastebasket. No hesitation, no emotion, just a soft thud as plastic hit plastic. Then I went back to work. When he returned, I could feel his presence before I heard him speak. There was a pause, a long one, the kind where confusion slowly turns into panic. Did you see my drink? He asked, looking around my desk like it might have fallen through a crack in reality. I turned to him with genuine confusion on my face. No, sorry, I said calmly. I didn't see anyone leave anything here. I just needed the desk space to work. I even gestured to the paperwork spread in front of me, like proof of innocence. He blinked, looked at the desk, looked at the wastebasket, looked back at me, then laughed awkwardly and walked away, muttering something under his breath. And I sat there, heart pounding, pretending to type while inside something incredible happened. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I didn't feel powerless. It didn't stop there. It never does. By the end of the day, it happened again. Different coworker, different drink, same outcome, drop, thud, confusion, apology. And every single time, I stayed polite, calm, professional. I never accused anyone. I never raised my voice. I never smiled either. I was a blank wall. And blank walls drive entitled people insane. The next few days were interesting. Some coworkers stopped leaving their drinks altogether. They'd hesitate, hover their hand over my desk, think better of it. Others weren't so quick to learn. They'd still set their drinks down, then return to find nothing. And each time their reactions escalated. Confusion turned into irritation. Irritation into suspicion. Are you sure you didn't move it? One asked, eyes narrowed slightly. I'm sure, I replied evenly. I didn't see anyone leave trash on my desk. That word mattered, trash. I said it gently, casually, like it was obvious. 'Cause to me it was. But the drinks were only half the problem. The real issue was the walking, the cutting through my space, the constant brushing, bumping, crowding. And as the drink situation quietly corrected itself, the foot traffic didn't. If anything, it got worse. People were annoyed now, defensive, less careful. That's when I started rolling my chair back. At first it was subtle, natural movements, the kind no one could accuse you of doing on purpose. If I needed a file, I'd roll back slightly and turn to the side drawer. And wouldn't you know it, someone would be cutting behind me at that exact moment. Ankles would collide with chair legs. Not hard, just enough. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'd say instantly, standing up. Are you okay? I didn't see you there. They'd wave it off, embarrassed, muttering that they were fine. But it happened again, and again. Always with the same people. Always while I was doing something completely normal. getting a file, adjusting my chair, turning to grab a document. Each time I apologized profusely. I asked if they needed help back to their desk. I even offered to write an accident report. That part really rattled them. Suddenly it wasn't funny. Suddenly it wasn't nothing. I could see the calculations start behind their eyes. The awareness. The realization that cutting through my workspace wasn't harmless anymore. That it came with consequences. And the best part? I never changed my tone. Never broke character. I was the perfect coworker, concerned, helpful, almost annoyingly polite. Inside, though, inside was different. Each bump released a little pressure. Each awkward apology chipped away at the resentment I'd been carrying. This wasn't explosive revenge. This was slow, methodical correction. Training, almost. Teaching adults something they should have learned years ago. By the end of the week, the pattern was obvious. The worst offenders were suddenly taking the long way around, giving my desk space a wide berth, watching where they walked, and when someone new tried to cut through, they got warned, quietly, by the same people who used to ignore me. "Careful there," I heard one say. "That desk's not a walkway." I kept my eyes on my screen, but inside I smiled. They were learning, and I wasn't done yet. By the second week, the office felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just careful. People walked slower near my desk. They glanced down at the floor. They checked their footing. And every time someone hesitated before cutting through my space, I felt a strange mix of relief and control. Not dominance, not cruelty, control. The kind you feel when your boundaries finally start existing. But not everyone learned at the same pace. There was one guy in particular, loud, confident, always in a rush. The type who believed accidents only happened to other people. He was one of the original offenders. One of the first to leave drinks on my desk like I was invisible. Even after the wastebasket incident, even after the chair bumps, he kept doing it. Not as often, but enough to tell me something important. He didn't think the rules applied to him. The near incident happened on a Wednesday. I remember because I hadn't slept well the night before. My nerves were already raw. I rolled my chair back to grab a folder from the side drawer. The same motion I'd done dozens of times before. That's when I felt resistance, not the light tap of an ankle. A solid stop. My chair jerked. I froze. He yelped, loud enough that heads turned. "Are you kidding me?" he snapped, grabbing his shin. I stood up immediately, heart racing. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I said, hands raised. "Are you okay? I didn't see you there." His face was red, not from pain, from embarrassment, from being seen. People were staring now, watching, waiting to see who was at fault. "I was just walking by," he said sharply. I nodded, calm, professional. "Yeah, I was just getting a file." I really didn't expect anyone to be right behind my chair. That was the moment something shifted. The room felt tense, like everyone suddenly understood that this wasn't just awkward anymore. This was liability. This was paperwork. This was HR territory. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "Do you want me to write an accident report? We can get this documented. I can walk you to your desk if you need." The color drained from his face. No, it's fine," he muttered. "I'm fine." He limped away, pride wounded far worse than his leg. And as he disappeared, the office exhaled. People turned back to their screens, but the message had landed. After that, the jokes stopped. The eye-rolling stopped. No one laughed off the bumps anymore. They avoided my area completely. Drinks vanished from my desk entirely. My workspace finally felt like mine. But here's the thing. No one tells you about standing up for yourself this way. It's exhausting. Staying calm takes energy. Staying polite takes effort. Every apology had to sound sincere. Every offer to help had to feel real. I couldn't slip. I couldn't gloat. One wrong tone and I'd be the villain. And I knew they were watching me now. I caught whispers when I walked past. Quick looks. Half sentences cut off mid-word. Not fear exactly. Respect mixed with caution. They didn't hate me. They just didn't want to deal with me. And honestly, that was perfect. Then management noticed, not directly, not yet, but the vibe changed. A supervisor walked by my desk one afternoon, slower than usual. Looked at the wastebasket, looked at the spacing, looked at the way people curved around my area like a detour sign. "Everything okay here?" she asked casually. "Yeah," I said without missing a beat. "Much better now." She nodded and kept walking. That was it. No meeting, no lecture, no warning, because there was nothing to warn me about. I had done nothing wrong. I'd followed every rule. I'd stayed professional. I'd documented nothing because nothing had escalated far enough to require it. And that's when I realized something important. The power hadn't shifted because I fought back. It shifted because I made their behavior inconvenient, uncomfortable, risky. I didn't confront them. Head on, I let reality do the work. By the end of that month, my desk was quiet, peaceful, mine. People walked around it naturally now, like it had always been that way. New hires learned fast. Old offenders avoided eye contact. And the loud guy? He never passed behind my chair again. Not once. I sat there one afternoon, rolling my chair back freely for the first time in ages, stretching my legs without fear of collision. And I felt it, that deep, steady calm. Not victory, closure. But the story didn't end there, because years later, when someone asked me if I felt bad about it, I had to be honest with myself. I wasn't proud, but I'd do it all again. By the time a full month passed, my desk had transformed from a public shortcut into a psychological boundary. Nothing physical had changed. Same chair, same desk, same corner near the door. But the way people reacted to that space was completely different. They slowed down. They adjusted their paths. They hesitated. And hesitation was everything. It meant awareness. It meant respect. It meant the message had finally landed where words never could. I noticed it in small moments first. Someone approaching from behind would pause, look at the narrow gap between my chair and the wall, then silently reroute. Another coworker would stop mid-step, mutter "never mind," and take the longer way around. No one announced it. No one apologized anymore. They just adapted. And every time it happened, I felt a quiet release in my chest. Like tension that had been coiled for months was finally loosening its grip. The worst offenders were completely different people now, the same ones who used to laugh, sigh, or act annoyed. When they bumped into my chair, were suddenly careful, deliberate. They held their drinks tighter. They kept their distance. It was almost surreal watching adults relearn basic courtesy without a single confrontation. No yelling, no meeting, no manager stepping in, just cause and effect playing out in real time. There was one afternoon that confirmed everything. I was deep into work, headphones on, focused in a way I hadn't been able to concentrate for a long time. I rolled my chair back fully, not 6 inches, not cautiously, but completely, stretching out as I reached for a file. Nothing happened. No collision, no startled yelp, no awkward apology. I realized in that moment that the space behind me was empty, completely clear, as it should have been all along. I leaned back for a second and let myself feel it. The calm, the safety, the dignity. People underestimate how powerful it is to simply feel secure in your own space. It changes how you sit, how you breathe, how you work. I was faster, sharper, less exhausted at the end of the day. Not because my job had changed, but because the constant low-level stress had finally disappeared. And then came the final confirmation. The loud guy, the one who had snapped, the one who thought none of this applied to him. I saw him approaching from the corner of my eye one day, walking fast like he always did. For a split second, I wondered if he'd test it again, if he'd try to squeeze through like before. He didn't. He slowed down, stopped, looked at my chair, then turned and walked the long way around without a word. No eye contact, no attitude, just acceptance. That was the moment I knew it was over. The behavior wasn't coming back. Not with him, not with anyone else. My desk was no longer a shortcut. It was no longer a dumping ground. It was no longer a place where people felt entitled to take from me without asking. It was just my desk. And that was enough. People sometimes think revenge has to be dramatic to be satisfying, that it has to end with someone yelling or getting fired or publicly embarrassed. But this wasn't that kind of story. This was quieter, cleaner, and honestly, more effective. Nobody got seriously hurt. Nobody lost their job. But everyone learned something, including me. I learned that politeness without boundaries is an invitation, that silence gets mistaken for permission, and that sometimes the only way to teach someone to respect your space is to let them experience the consequences of ignoring it. I also learned something else, that standing up for yourself doesn't always feel heroic. It doesn't come with a big speech or applause. Sometimes it feels awkward. Sometimes it feels petty. Sometimes you even question yourself afterward. I did. I won't pretend I didn't. I asked myself if I'd gone too far, if I'd been unfair, if I should have just endured it like everyone else. But every time I asked that question, I rolled my chair back freely. I opened my drawer without flinching. I worked without being bumped, brushed, or crowded. And the answer became very clear. I wasn't proud of how I did it, but I was proud that I did something. 'Cause for the first time in that office, I wasn't invisible. Years have passed since that office. Different job, different desk, different people, but every now and then, usually when someone talks about workplace drama or disrespect, that memory comes back to me. Not the drinks, not the chair bumps, the feeling. That slow erosion of dignity that happens when people treat your space like it doesn't matter. Because once someone feels entitled to your desk, it's never really about the desk. It's about how much of you they think they can take without consequence. Looking back now, I understand why it bothered me so deeply. It wasn't the inconvenience. It wasn't even the mess. It was the assumption. The assumption that I would tolerate it, that I would stay quiet, that I would adapt while they never had to change. That kind of dynamic creeps in quietly at work. No one announces it. No one votes on it. It just happens. And suddenly you're the one shrinking to make everyone else comfortable. What I did wasn't heroic. It wasn't dramatic. There was no confrontation where I finally stood up and everyone clapped. In fact, most people probably never even realized what changed. They just adjusted. They learned. They stopped crossing a line because crossing it no longer felt safe or convenient. And that's the part people don't like to talk about. Boundaries only work when there's friction, when ignoring them costs something. I've been asked before if I felt guilty. The honest answer is a little. Not because they got hurt. No one was seriously injured. But because part of me still carried that old training. The training that says you should always be nice, always accommodating, always the bigger person. But then I remember how it felt sitting there every day. Tense, waiting for the next bump, the next drink, the next reminder that my comfort ranked dead last. And that guilt fades fast. Because here's the truth. If I had kept swallowing it, they wouldn't have stopped. People rarely stop behavior that benefits them unless something forces the change. They weren't malicious villains. They were careless, entitled, used to moving through the world without resistance. And the moment resistance appeared, polite and professional as it was, they adapted, just like everyone does. What stayed with me most wasn't the satisfaction of revenge. It was the relief, the ability to roll my chair back without thinking, to open a drawer without checking over my shoulder, to work without bracing myself for impact. That kind of peace changes how you see yourself. It reminds you that you're allowed to take up space, that you don't need permission to protect what's yours. I wouldn't recommend my exact method to everyone. Different workplaces, different risks, different dynamics, but the lesson is universal. Silence teaches people how to treat you. So does consistency. I didn't lash out once and then back down. I stayed calm every time, apologized every time, offered help every time, and that consistency is what made it impossible to argue with. I was never the problem. The situation was. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet and repetitive, and deeply uncomfortable for the people who thought they could get away with things. Sometimes it looks like a wastebasket. Sometimes it sounds like an apology. And sometimes it feels like finally breathing normally at your desk. I'm not proud of everything I did, but I'm proud that I didn't stay small. I'm proud that I chose myself in a situation where no one else was going to. And if I ever found myself at that desk again, with those same people making those same assumptions, I'd do it all again. Because respect once learned tends to stick. If this story hit a nerve, you're not alone. If you've ever been disrespected at work and wished you could reclaim your space without blowing everything up, smash that like button. Subscribe for more real, emotionally charged revenge. Stories that prove justice doesn't always have to be loud to be effective. And tell us in the comments, what's the quietest but most satisfying revenge you've ever seen or experienced?